All right, you ready to get your PDH today? I sure hope so, because you're not going to see one video, but two. We're going to discuss the labyrinth weirs that run beneath Crystal Bridges Museum of American Art, and that controls the drainage basin there to protect multi-million dollars worth of art. And in the second video, we're going to discuss the largest single highway contract in Arkansas history, the new Flyover at US 412 in Benton County. Break out your notepad, buckle in, and enjoy. All right, well, good afternoon. I'm Richard Massey with C+S Engineer Magazine, which is a division of Zweig Group, a full-service consulting firm for the AE industry based in Fayetteville, Arkansas. And today I'm doing a webcast with Mr. Brent Massey, who is Principal and VP of Operations for CEI Engineering Associates, a firm based in Bentonville and established back in 1973. You have 6 offices in 5 states with 90 employees, so those are pretty good numbers. How you doing today, Mr. Massey?
Doing great.
Good, good. Well, we appreciate you meeting with us today. We're going to talk about quite a few things, all of it related to architecture, engineering, and management today. But the big prize that we're here to discuss, obviously, is the hydraulics and the waterworks that were put in beneath the dining hall and the North Gallery at Crystal Bridges Museum of American Art in Bentonville, which has turned out to be not only a blockbuster for the art world, but a blockbuster for tourism,
Absolutely.
a blockbuster for branding for all of Northwest Arkansas. And more importantly, it's a great statement for what a great public entity, which essentially what Crystal Bridges is, can do for people. There's already been, I think, over 2 million people have visited the museum. Of course, priceless works of art, which we'll get into later. And Brent, your firm did the civil engineering for this program. So, and I think it took you 6 years to get it done.
Yeah, we worked on it for a while.
And before we get into some of the technical aspects, what was it like being part of a program that has such national appeal?
We were really privileged to get to work alongside the Walton family and of course world-renowned Moshe Safdie as an architect. What it did for Northwest Arkansas, as you commented, an incredible project for our company. High profile, very important to the state, to the country as well, and as you said, the art industry as well as tourism, Northwest Arkansas, all of those things. We were very privileged. It was a great project for us, gave us a lot of recognition, and just a real privilege to be a part of it.
Yeah, and let's hit on that. That's one of the questions that I wanted to ask you outside of the technical aspect is, you have this program on your resume. Obviously, that's going to go into the RFIP package when you're looking for work. And how has that, being on your resume, how has that helped your business?
It's one of those, from a marketing standpoint, it's hard to trace it
Right.
exactly, but everybody knows about Crystal Bridges, and to be able to have that on our resume, to be able to put in RFQs, SOQs with Crystal Bridges as a part of our resume really does give us some credibility, especially in the hydrology and hydraulics. For those that have seen it, have been to it, who know some of the complications associated with it. It's a very technical project and something that not very many engineers have an opportunity to be a part of. And so that aspect does set us apart in some of those areas. At the same time, there's challenges with every RFP
Sure.
and competing. There's not many museum projects out there.
Right.
So the challenge of having a museum on your project, you also have clients that say, well, we're not building a Crystal
Right.
Bridges.
We're not a museum.
We're not a museum.
Right.
And so there's trade-offs for that. But overall, overwhelmingly, it's been a very positive part of our marketing, a very positive part of our statement of qualifications. Very good for us.
Yeah, I'm glad you spoke to the marketing aspect of that. So before we started filming, we're talking a big part of the Crystal Bridges program was obviously Moshe Safdie, the internationally acclaimed architect. I think he's based out of Boston. And he wanted this museum to sit 3.5 feet above the water flow. And I know as an engineer, you were thinking that's too close for comfort. Yeah. So, and you'd mentioned kind of an arm wrestling match. Talk about that. I mean, Moshe Safdie he's good, but he's very demanding and he gets his way. Mm-hmm. So how did your firm deal with that?
Not only Moshe Safdie is demanding and generally gets his way, but so does Alice Walton.
Yeah.
Childhood, it was her childhood land.
Right.
And so she played on that land. She had a vision for what she wanted. Obviously, to bring Moshe Safdie into that mix and be able to talk through what the two of them envisioned for a marquee project, a marquee museum for this part of the country. They had a very succinct vision going into the plan. The water feature was absolutely critical for them to be an integral part of the design, a part of the museum. Proximity to the water was something that Moshe was very set on. And as you said, from an engineer's perspective, we're ultra conservative. Not only are they trying to put this museum close to the water, but they're building it across a floodway. There's nowhere else for the water to go except through the project. That's unheard of. Every engineer will tell you that you always have a good emergency spillway for the what-ifs. And there's no emergency spillway at Crystal Bridges. 700 acres of drainage basin flows through the museum under two of the buildings and right up against all of the other buildings. It's built in the valley, nowhere else for the water to go. And so there was somewhat of a wrestling match, if you will, of how close can we get it to the water? And our response was not very close. And their response was get it closer.
Get it closer. Yeah.
And so that went back and forth. And, we did a lot of research in terms of trying to quantify that risk, be able to qualify how much water can we handle, what is the risk, and you think about priceless works of art, $35 million original oil of George Washington.
She's got 10 Andy Warhols.
Exactly. So how much risk are you willing to tolerate?
Sure.
And at what point do you say that's too much risk? And so that was challenging. That we spent a lot of time in the early design aspects going back and forth on trying to understand. We say this is how much water you can expect, and do you realize what that potential risk is? And none of us can predict a 500-year storm or a 100-year storm, or even though the predictability says that it's once every 500 years, that's not really the case. The reality is those are probabilities. You can have a 500-year storm, you have Hurricane Harvey again tomorrow.
Sure.
Those sorts of things are unpredictable, and so there was a challenge there to try to understand.
Right, and for the uninitiated, it's the Town Branch Creek and a natural spring called Crystal Springs that feed this water feature. And there's two labyrinth weirs there that can move 4,000
4,000 cubic feet per second.
4,000 cubic feet per second, which is 1.5 times a 500-year flood event.
Correct.
So, having been to the museum about 20 times and being very familiar with the permanent collection and some of the exhibitions that go through, those are some big numbers. And, the Museum of Fine Art Houston just survived Harvey. And the Menil collection, which is also in downtown Houston, survived. And that made national news in the art magazines, the art columns. Do you keep track of those kind of things?
I have to say I really don't. I'm not an art aficionado.
Right.
I've been to Crystal Bridges a lot and gained a lot of appreciation for art through Crystal Bridges. So Alice Walton's vision absolutely paid off in my case, exposure for people that have recently or have not been exposed before. But no, I hadn't heard that until you said that.
Right. Well, as you know, these webcasts, we have to identify 4 objectives, and we have to answer those objectives so that folks who are watching these videos can get an educational aspect out of it. And I want to get to that directly. And I've read through the collateral that went into all the research that you had to do, the 100-year flood, the 500-year flood, the 100-mile radius, the greatest rainfall ever recorded in the state of Arkansas, and just the deep books that you had to go in to get. So, how do you identify the steps necessary to determine hydraulic design flows for critical projects?
I think for us, it was identification of risk first.
Risk.
Yeah, we go through the same protocol that any other civil engineer would have gone through in terms of analyzing the flood maps. It's in a floodway. The property has about 1,300 feet of floodway. And so we did the flood analysis. We ended up doing a full Clomer-Lomer through FEMA for
Right.
the project. So those are all the normal aspects that every civil engineer would go through, doing your 10, 50, 100-year storms for completion of that Lomer. But the challenging part for critical projects is really trying to manage that risk. And so we did, as you mentioned, we looked at precipitation from the National Weather Service for a broad range of area around Crystal Bridges. 100-mile radius essentially was about a 9.6 inches in a 24-hour period was the record for anything close to us.
Right, but there's more rainfall further out.
There is. The state record for Arkansas is 14.6 inches. In a 24-hour period. And just to kind of put that in perspective, Houston Intercontinental during Hurricane Harvey, their greatest rainfall was 16 inches in one day in a 24-hour period.
And that just got beat.
That was during that time.
Right, right.
And, Houston Hobby, I think, had 10 or 12 inches per day. So we looked at Arkansas, and 100 miles around us to try to figure out what might be reasonable. We also went through the process of doing a probable maximum precipitation calculation, which is a fairly in-depth. Most civil engineers don't do that on a normal project.
Okay.
But in a critical project like this, there are methodologies out there to be able to do a PMP, a probable maximum precipitation.
Probable maximum precipitation.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so that is really a calculation of what is the most rainfall that you could have theoretically for this region, these type of weather conditions, everything, the kind of the perfect storm. Ours is around 25 inches in a 24-hour period. Probable maximum. And we went back and forth, as we discussed earlier, about, okay, what is that probability and how much, in our case, how much does a 25-inch storm raise the buildings off of the proximity to the water? And as you play with that, that was part of the equation for us to maximize the capacity of the weirs along with minimizing the building to the water. And we basically kind of came to the conclusion of a 16-inch storm based on hydraulic or hydrologic data within that 100-mile radius, other maximums outside of the 100-mile radius. We looked at Kansas, Missouri, Oklahoma, of course Arkansas, even east into Tennessee and Kentucky, just to try to get a feel of what possibly could happen, and looked at weather data for all of those. In all of that, we came to the conclusion of 16 inches,
16 inches.
in a 24-hour period was what everyone felt was a reasonable calculation in terms of risk, and that translates into that 4,000 CFS.
Right, and I know you didn't come to that conclusion overnight, so that was the real intellectual stronghold of this firm, is to figure out that 16 inches, 24 hours. So evaluate various hydraulic structures based on hydraulic performance, reliability, and ease of maintenance, which is big for this program because a log could come down there at any time.
Absolutely. So I'll start with that. You mentioned about a log or a tree. We're in the Missouri, Arkansas, Ozark region, and so we are blessed with a lot of hardwoods and very steep ravines.
Right.
About 100 feet of relief from the upper parking deck of Crystal Bridges down to the water. And it makes for some steep slopes that trees fall. They get washed down the creek during flash floods. And so that's a part of the calculation when we looked at that risk. Being able to determine a structure that was reliable in terms of being able to work in a whole multitude of circumstances. We looked at a lot of different options. We looked at sluice gates, which is a primary, when you look at high capacity dams, small dams across the country, whether those are Corps of Engineer dams, hydroelectric dams, almost all of those use a sluice gate system because it's a high capacity, high volume type mechanism. The problem we found in our application was that sluice gates require power, and we could not afford to take a risk.
Because that's a maintenance issue.
It's a maintenance issue in an emergency, in a catastrophic event, which is what we were prepared for.
That's the first thing that happens is power goes out.
Power goes
Right,
out.
yeah.
Now you have to have generators and backup and all those kind of things, which has an aesthetic implication for Moshe's design.
Right.
And so that was not really a highly sought after issue either, to have a lot of backup generators or things that required, multiple facets to ensure reliability. And so when we looked at the Labyrinth weir, it's somewhat of a simple design in terms of the construction of it. It's concrete, reinforced steel concrete structure that allows for very limited low maintenance. It's not reliant on power. It's not reliant on someone to throw the switch or to open a valve or to have somebody there at 2 in the morning when the storm of the century hits. And so for all those reasons, we went through that reliability statement. We went through the ease of construction. We went through the ease of maintenance. It doesn't have any seals or gaskets like a sluice gate or other valves. There's no manual.
Core drilled into the bedrock.
It is.
Right.
18 inches thick concrete. So it should stand the test of time.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, and reading about the program, it was neat because it's called a labyrinth weir, and basically it, in a compressed area, it allows for a greater floodplain.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's simple. I mean, the math is complex, but it's really comes down to it just creates more space
Yeah, that's in a nutshell. Kind of that zigzag pattern of a labyrinth weir allows you to put 2 to 3 times the volume of water as opposed to a normal weir structure.
Good. And now let's get to objective 4. Recognize options for non-traditional design and construction in and around floodways. I know you've kind of hit on that, but I'm sure you've got a few more details for that.
Yeah, so, for most of us as civil engineers, we generally practice the by-the-book standards. Not uncommon to do a Clomer-Lomer process, not uncommon to make modifications in the floodplain. Most folks are not constructing a building in the floodway and across the floodway. Most folks don't operate without an emergency spillway, and so normal protocol, normal civil engineering, we tend to get stuck inside the box. And in our case, we were prompted from the outside to be able to solve a problem. And that problem was, we want to build it here, we want to build it in the valley, we want to build it across the water, and we want it close to the water. Solve the problem. And that challenge is a great thing for engineers. That's what we're trained to do. We're skilled and trained to solve problems. Sometimes we have to remember that there's not a confinement of problem solving. And for us, we were prompted and kind of kick-started with Moshe Softy being somewhat demanding. But the challenge, I think, for all civil engineers is to recognize, and the cliche is out there used too often, the out-of-the-box thinking, but sometimes there are ways to get around what is the norm. And in our case, we absolutely were able to look at different options. Well, what if? What if we did a probable maximum precipitation? What would it say? What about a non-traditional type weir? And we had never designed a labyrinth weir before.
Oh, okay.
And so we did a lot of research. We looked at a lot of different options. And that's part of the civil engineer's job, is to find ways to solve the problem.
Right.
And that's what I would encourage other people, is to really consider, and we tell our young engineers all the time, let's figure out a way to solve the problem. And it's not always the conventional methods.
And good morning. This is Richard Massey with C+S Engineer Magazine, and I am with Brent Massey, who is Vice President of Operations and Principal at CEI Engineering Associates, based in Bentonville. How you doing this morning?
Very good. Thank you, Richard.
Good. We're here to talk about this incredible labyrinth weir system that CEI installed several years back to control the floodway and the waterway that runs just 3.5 feet beneath these priceless works of art here at Crystal Bridges Museum. And so just wanted to go ahead and open up and talk to you a little bit, Brent. It's an incredible program, and Crystal Bridges has turned out to be one of the premier museums in the United States. So before we get into anything technical, tell us about the emotional, the spiritual side that you got out of being such a big part of this big program.
Well, it really was an amazing experience for us as a company, for me personally, to get to work on a project of this magnitude. Doesn't come along very often. It's kind of a once-in-a-lifetime project for engineers, for our company. It's had a profound effect on Northwest Arkansas and the state. For us, it was just a neat project, a lot of stress, as we talked before.
Sure, that we'll get back into.
But really challenging technically, but very exciting from a standpoint of not many projects like this in the country. Only a handful in the entire world that have labyrinth weirs, and I don't know of really any that have priceless works of art sitting right on top of a labyrinth weir. So that's a pressure cooker of just the stress that goes with that. And as we kind of talked before, every time it rains, heavy rains,
Yeah.
we kind of make sure everything's okay and check with the building and grounds director and make sure everything is going well. But so far, so good.
Great. And for the uninitiated, we're at Crystal Bridges on site right now. And behind us is the dining hall. And what you can't see north is the North Gallery, which are the two principal pieces of this architecture that are installed with the wares. And let's get down to the actual construction of this. At one point in time, this was a big red dirt hole in a ravine in a remote part of Benton County. So how was it working in such a challenging setting?
This was the childhood home for Alice Walton, and so 100 acres basically here on site of very rugged ravines, the creek that flows through the bottom of the property. It's about 100 feet of elevation change from up on the top of the parking deck to down here where we're at
Quite a bit.
At creek level. And so that's challenging in itself, the fact that everything in the construction site is at the bottom of the bowl.
Right.
And so every time it rains, water comes to the construction site, which is totally backwards from most construction projects where you route water around the construction site. In this case, everything is coming to the construction site. We ended up building an under drain system, a pipe system that bypassed the creek underneath the entire length of the construction, which is about a quarter of a mile, about 1,500 feet from the south end of the project all the way to the north end of the project. So during that time, everything is happening in the bottom of this ravine, and construction activity, all the trucks, all the equipment, everything is down here, and everything of the outside world is all up there.
Right.
And so, the challenge with that for the contractor, just very difficult conditions, lots of equipment in harm's way in terms of any kind of potential flash flooding. All of those kind of things happen on this project. Just a part of everyday normal Crystal Bridges activity after the first couple of years.
Right. So you got a little mud on your boots.
Absolutely.
Well, you had told me a great anecdote during our prior interview, at least before the camera started rolling, that at one point in time that you were under the belief that former President George Bush was going to be here for the groundbreaking for this museum.
Mm-hmm.
So you really had to put the horsepower on it and describe the fact that at least you were under the belief that one of the most powerful people in the entire world was coming here.
Yeah, they had made the announcement for a opening date of 11/11/11. November 11th, 2011 had been announced. There was a pre-opening VIP that was going to happen, I forget exactly how many days, 2 or 3 days prior to the grand opening. And at that time, George W. Bush, then President, and First Lady Laura were supposed to be at the festivities. I don't know if they made it or not. We happened to be in the hole, lights on, construction still going on at whatever, 9, 10 o'clock at night, trying to finish all those last little details of every project that, all you lack is finishing. We were right there in it. Like I say, VIP reception was going on. We weren't invited to the reception. We had priority to get the project done.
Right. Well, good. So that was a lot of motivation and a lot of incentive to get this done. Describe, finishing something like this and having rain events coming through there, and what you go through thinking that, is it done?
Yeah, challenging because everything we had done is working to control the floodway, all the hydrology, the hydraulics. Everything was supposed to work at a finished product, but what do you do in the interim? And in our case, we got challenged a couple of different times with the weather. April of 2011, 6 months or so before grand opening, The weirs were not even complete at that time, and no pond liner in, lots of those things. Pretty good sized flood event, probably a 20-year, 25-year storm. That challenged us before construction was over. When we started with the pond liner and kind of as you have to work your way out, where we're standing here, there's no access. Once the two buildings were put on the weir, there's no way to get construction equipment in and out.
Okay.
The cranes were all removed by that time, and so we literally had to back our way out from a construction standpoint to be able to complete the project. So what you're looking at here behind us, all of the liner of the pond was laid in from the downstream end, from the north gallery, backing out, and then they completed the last section of weir, drove the last piece of equipment through the weir, started forming the concrete weir section, and if it would have rained a substantial event at that time, everything upstream of that main weir would have been flooded, and everything inside here in the pond would have worked perfectly. But on the upside, we were still backing out, working our way out of the project, even to grand opening day. We were during the final touches. Well, here we are at the kind of the north end of the project. Behind me you can see the exit of the labyrinth weirs from under the north gallery. Can actually look back up in the background and see underneath the buildings all the way back to the dining hall gallery and see the weirs from the backside. And the cool part about this part of the project is this is where the transition comes back from really being 100-foot wide through the project corridor back to transitioning to just a pretty small 15-20 foot of width for the floodway, and then that natural transition from the project back into that minimalistic footprint that Moshe Softy and Alice Walton envisioned, back to the natural terrain that is the beauty of Crystal Bridges. And so you get to see a little bit of everything in the background, a little bit of the relief from the building down to the water level, the final pool, a little bit of a waterfall effect exiting the pool, and then again the riprap and the flood protection around the corridor of the stream. So that gives you a full view from kind of the south end of the project all the way here to the north end and everything in between. Well, we're here in the dining hall, the south labyrinth weir, looking back to the south, looking at Town Branch Creek. This really gives you a visual of what Moshe Softy had in mind when he was talking about having the experience of the buildings very close to the water. And so we're about 7 or 8 feet from the water level at this point, standing here in the dining hall. You can see Town Branch Creek flowing into the museum area behind me. The area that you see here to the south of me, as I said before, is about 2.5 million gallons of water filling this pond. Both ponds are lined with a bentonite clay liner. And so we've got just an opportunity to really showcase what's going on with the creek and the proximity of the buildings. As you see the rock line channel to be able to handle the flows. So just a little bit about the technical aspects of what's happening here at Crystal Bridges looking to the south. All right, so here we are looking back to the north from the dining hall. You get a sense of just kind of the overall scale of the project. The pond behind me, about 1.5 million gallons of water. Off behind me, you can see the labyrinth weir and see some of the kind of the zigzag nature of the geometry underneath the north gallery. Gives you a visual of how that 3 to 3.5 foot of open space kind of blends in with the buildings, both hidden from a visual standpoint but functional from an engineering standpoint, and just the opportunity to see just from scale of just how small of an opening that we're putting 4,000 cubic feet per second through that labyrinth weir underneath the building. The other thing that's interesting from up here, you can see the sanitary sewer tunnel that runs through the length of the project, a main 36-inch line, a main sanitary trunk line for the city of Bentonville, also runs through the project, which complicates things a little bit. So there's almost a quarter of a mile of tunnel for sanitary sewer through this part of the project, under the buildings, around the weir, all those complications that go with it. But again, just another perspective of what the architect had in mind in terms of being able to see and have the water feature as a part of the overall experience.
This is Richard Massey with Civil Plus Structural Engineer magazine, and I am here on a brand new stretch of highway in northwest Arkansas, Benton County to be particular. This is a 4.5 mile stretch, and if you can believe this, it cost $100 million. Now that might not sound like a whole lot for you folks out there in the really big markets, but $100 million for a single stretch of road is the largest contract ever let in the history of Arkansas infrastructure. So we're here shooting a video on this brand new road, and one of the things that you're going to see today when you watch this video is you're going to hear people talking about coordination, coming together to meet a common goal, the private sector and the public sector working hand in hand to not only find a problem but to develop a solution. And this stretch of road that you see here is part of that solution. It will eventually stretch further west to Tawnytown and further east to Sonora for a complete 20 miles. But the 4.5 mile stretch that you see today is the beginning of a 20-year plan to handle the booming population in northwest Arkansas. Yeah, Lieutenant Governor Griffin, I'm Richard Massey with C+S Engineer magazine. Yeah, we're so glad you came up from Little Rock.
Sure.
And we heard you talking earlier about growth and really about the public sector coming together with the private sector, the people who voted for the tax, who got that through, and the great planning that went on in
Sure.
northwest Arkansas to establish this as a program. So just kind of tell us what this new road really means.
Well, first of all, it goes without saying that northwest Arkansas as a destination, not only to visit but to live for years, has been a hot item. And the more success it has, the more success that follows. It's listed in magazines as being one of the best places to live. It's a great place for jobs, wonderful quality of life, low cost of living compared to the rest of the country. So everything about this area is attractive to people to move in. What that means is you're going to have a lot more people on the roads.
Sure.
And we've got to stay on top of that and stay ahead of it to make sure that our infrastructure, our highways and infrastructure, continue to connect people for quality of life, so you're not sitting in your car all the time, but also for commerce.
Sure.
Companies have to be able to count on, all over Arkansas, highways and infrastructure to do business. If we want to grow jobs, infrastructure and highways are a critical part of that equation. Yeah, the tax code is very important, and the governor has done some concrete things to make that more attractive. The regulatory structure is important, our workforce training is important, but make no mistake about it, highways and infrastructure are a critical part of that equation. They are an ingredient in that recipe for continued job growth and economic opportunity. So you've got to have it. It's not a luxury, it is absolutely essential. And this particular project's about a $100 million project. that was funded through the ballot
House Senate Sales
initiative.
Tax,
Yep.
yep, from 2012.
That's right. And so this is something the voters approved, and I think the voters were very forward-looking in doing that. Look at it. All you got to do is drive around in the morning or at night, around drive time for work, and you'll see we need to continue to deal with the burden that is on the infrastructure, and that means better and more and bigger, and that's what this is.
Okay, well,
Did I miss anything?
You got it all.
Good, good, good.
Good morning, everyone. We've got a great crowd here today, and I want to thank everyone for being here. It's a great day to be in Northwest Arkansas, and I know everybody is just as excited as I am to cut a ribbon on this great project. Before we get started, we want to have a presentation of colors.
Detail. Halt. Post. Colors.
You'll please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Order. On. Parade. Rest.
I want to say thanks to the members of the Arkansas National Guard for that, and thank you so much for your service to our country. I want to start by introducing several people that are here with us today. We have all 5 members of our Highway Commission. We have Chairman Dick Trammell from Rogers. We have our Vice Chairman Tom Schick from Little Rock, Robert Moore from Arkansas City, Alec Farmer from Jonesboro, and our newest Commissioner Philip Taldo from Springdale. And we're also honored to have Commissioner Emeritus Bobby Hopper with us here. Great to have him here. Also happy to have Lieutenant Governor Tim Griffin with us. He'll speak to us in just a moment, and I do want to tell you he is filling in for the governor several times today, so after he speaks, he's going to have to make a pretty quick exit. I know I've seen several state legislators here. Y'all raise your hand. Thank you all for what you do, and congressional staff, we don't have the actual members here, but congressional staff members here. We have some of you here. Thank you for being here. Local elected officials, city, county, everybody, thank you all for being here too. We also have several people that have been involved in this project. It was designed by Garver Engineers, and HDR did a little bit of work on that. Crafton Toll and Associates did some of the surveying work, and Brown and Gay helped us with the construction inspection on this, and we're thankful for all of them. But I also want to recognize the staff that we have from the Arkansas Department of Transportation. These folks do a great job from the planning to design to the operations, construction and maintenance on our roads every day, not just a project like this, but all the highways that we have around the country. So staff from RDOT, raise your hand. And I want you all to thank them for everything they do for our public every day. Now, most of you all remember in December of 2014, we let this project to contract. It was a little over $100 million, the largest single contract that we had let at that time. But I want to go back even further than that. I have been involved in this project maybe as long or longer as anyone, even from the time that we were first considering a bypass on the southern end of Springdale. We actually had a route laid out, weren't able to go through with that, but ironically enough, it's about exactly where Don Tyson Parkway is built today. That was done by the city. even after we weren't able to do that, we were looking at better connections through town. Some of you may remember the proposal that we had just to eliminate the little jog in Highway 412 at 71B. We found out that that wasn't going to be good enough for the growth that was being experienced in this region, and that's when we started work on this Springdale Northern Bypass. A lot of preliminary work, a lot of environmental studies, a lot of planning went into that, and then, like I said, the contract was awarded in late 2014. Work began just a couple of months after that. And now, here we're standing on 4.5 miles of this 4-lane divided freeway that goes from Interstate 49 over to Highway 112. Along with that project, there are about 14 bridges, different types of bridges, either over waterways, ramps, overpasses. Those bridges total about 1.25 miles. So $100 million, 4.5 miles total, but about 1.25 miles worth of bridges. And along the way, crews moved about 5.5 million cubic yards of earthwork and placed about almost 2.5 miles of storm drain along the way. So this has been talked about for a long time. I also want to congratulate Utah Construction Company for the great work that they've done on getting us to this point. We are actually going to be able to open this section a little bit early. So that's always a good thing. A lot of benefits in safety and mobility, better connections in this area, better help to accommodate the growth that we're experiencing in Northwest Arkansas. So this has been a really good project, and we're really excited to be here today to open this up. And with that, I want to turn everything over to Lieutenant Governor Tim Griffin. Tim.
Thank you all. This is not just a ribbon cutting. This is a celebration. We call that a party. This is a big deal, and you should be excited about this. And whether you drive or not, you ought to be excited about this. The growth in Northwest Arkansas and this part of the state continues, and we cannot be behind the curve in terms of upgrading and adding highways and infrastructure. We have to be ahead of it, because let me tell you, there's no indication that the growth is going to slow down. It's going to keep on coming. And we want those jobs to grow, and we want people to come here and visit, and we want people to come here and live. But thank you for including me. I always love to come to a party, and I heard y'all were having one here, and I know y'all wouldn't be here if this wasn't fun. Thank y'all so much. God bless you, and let's keep on building the highways and infrastructure that can deal with the growth and the development in this part of the state. Thank y'all.
Aren't y'all excited? Yes. I'm looking over here at Archie, and Archie, it's been a long time since we had a road like this open. Now, let me just say this. We got Bobby here. Bobby Hopper is the father of highways in Arkansas. And you know what was great is Alec Farmer's dad served with Bobby back when he was on the commission. But let me just ask you a question. You invested in this. How do you like the 6 lanes I-49? Do you like that? Woo-hoo. Hey, I haven't had a complaint yet, so thank you all for, and I just want you to know, it goes back to, we had public hearings in 2002 about this highway. I've had the privilege of watching it be built, and I just want to say that the construction company, they did a great job and took care of this place, and just think of the economic things that happened because this highway was being built and the construction. Utah did a great job. Now let me just say thank you. Thank you for being the citizens of Arkansas. You know, back in 2012 when we passed Connecting Arkansas, you stepped up, all of you here. And when I look around this room, if I'm running for office today and I'm not, I'd be working this crowd just as hard as I could, you know, because you make the difference. And you know, when I think about that, I want to say thank you for voting for the half-cent tax in 2012, Connecting Arkansas. That's 36 projects all over Arkansas, and I've been in Arkansas 80 years. And we go to Jonesboro, we go to Little Rock, we go down to South Arkansas. Because of you, we have better highways. And then the last thing I want to mention is I thank you for your support during my term as a highway commissioner for Arkansas. I've got about 6 months left, and after 9 years, the mayors, the judges, you have stepped up and helped us make things happen all over our state, but for me, particularly in Northwest Arkansas. And you know, when we think about the future, I just want to mention one thing, and you heard Tim talk about this, is we've got the funding because you stepped up. And this is an election year, so you need to talk to who the candidates are running for our offices in Arkansas and say, do you support highway funding? Now, I know Dan Douglas does. He's been doing that. He's been beat up forever, Dan, but we appreciate that. But ask them, are you in favor of highway funding in Arkansas? And if they say yes, how are we going to do it? You know, we hadn't had any gasoline tax increase or whatever, but highways are so important. And if Bobby Hopper hadn't had the vision of I-49 years and years ago, where would we be today? So thank you for that. But traffic safety is our job. I thank you for letting me serve you over these 9 years. You all have been just great to me. And I got one person who, after 9 years, she's got me all dressed up and told me what I should wear and comb my hair and everything. And she's never been to a ribbon cutting, so I just got to say thank you to my wife, Nancy Trammell, and to you, the people. And let me tell you, during my 9 years serving with these commissioners, the ones prior to them, they take care of Arkansas, they believe in Arkansas, and you cannot beat the 3,600 plus employees of RDOT in Arkansas. They take care of us 24 hours a day, in the sleet, in the snow, in the dust, whatever. So thank you so much, and I'm so glad you're here today. And remember, when you see orange barrels, it's gonna get better. Thank you.
It is an honor to be here today, and whenever Chairman Trammell came on the commission nearly 10 years ago, this was just a dream. And you know, we have to hand it to, again, the taxpayers of the state of Arkansas for enabling us to be able to do this. We need to thank the RDOT family, who Chairman Trammell told us was 3,600 strong. Yes, and we're just proud to be here today. It's a privilege for me too, because I've got 9 more years on the commission, and you know, my main focus in Northwest Arkansas is going to be the completion of this bypass. It's the #1 focus on my mind. Of course, there's a lot of other projects. We've got the whole state to look after, but in Northwest Arkansas, this is going to be my focus, and we've got that to look forward to.
Thank you. Well, this is an exciting day, one that we've looked forward to for a long time. And you know, as Dick, I'm going to remember that line about orange barrels, because people of Springdale, by almost 90%, just voted to spend about almost $80 million of their money on improvements in Springdale, and I'm thankful for that. I'm also thankful, as was mentioned before, the voters all around the state of Arkansas that made this project possible. And you know, as I was walking up here, I was walking with Mayor Long, and we were admiring. Look down at the pavement. We were admiring the workmanship and the driving surface, and I said to Eldon, I said, I hope this is the closest look we ever get to it. But it is a true, you know, driving on a new highway like this is so exciting, because you're looking out both sides. You have views that you've never had before, and we're just so excited. I want to thank Director Bennett and the whole staff, everyone at RDOT, certainly the Highway Commission. Thank you all for your support for this project. And again, thank the voters, not only of Northwest Arkansas, but around the state. I'm going to end with one quote. That mid-19th century author and newspaper editor, Horace Greeley. Go west, young man, go west. And I'll add to that, we'd be happy if you went east a little ways too.
when you take your grandchildren across this highway 15 years from now, you'll see all types of development you never dreamed of. When we are now approaching nearly 40 people a day coming into this area, generating almost 250 to 300,000 people in the next 15 years, the only way they've got to go, Doug, I think, is west. Isn't there a lake on the other side? so we're just getting started. And the connectivity that this segment, being the first segment, is so important to the vitality of XNA and having a good route to get back and forth there. So we don't want to forget that, continue to work on that.
And we asked, what are your priorities? What do you want to see out of a program like this? And they came back with 3 things. So widening Interstate 49, let's complete development of the bypass, and let's at least get started on the Springdale bypass. And that's exactly what we did. So you're standing today on more than just a $100 million stretch of road. You're standing on an investment. It's an investment in safety, it's an investment in mobility, in the economy, the people, the quality of life, and the future. But you're also standing on a commitment. We made a promise when we asked everybody to vote for a half-cent sales tax for a major highway program that we would come to this day.
So there you have it. There's a brand new highway in Northwest Arkansas, and a lot of people are happy.